Yokoso. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Defense Forum from Tokyo. This program is in Japanese with simultaneous interpretation in English. Please select your language choice at the bottom of your screen. The topic tonight is Space Surveillance. Former Vice Minister of Defense, Masanori Nishi, and joined by Hiroshi Yamakawa, Norihiri Sakamoto, and Dr. Scott N. Pace. This program is organized by the International Security Industry Council of Japan, produced by Restless Creations, and sponsored by Bay Systems. Interpreters tonight are Paul Hersey and Christopher Field. Nishi-san, you are welcome to begin the discussion.
Welcome to the ISIC Japan seminar. I am the chairman, Masanori Nishi. This NPO was born out of a network of Japanese, American, and English friends. Tonight we will be hearing about matters that concern space. As you all know, the Crew Dragon spacecraft developed by SpaceX successfully launched this week at just past 9 a.m. on the 16th Japan time. This mission used a spacecraft developed by a private company, and the first stage rocket has been recovered. So this marks the start of a new space challenge at lower costs. The first passenger is JAXA's Soichi Noguchi. And we will be talking to Dr. Yamakawa this time. He runs a large organization of 1,500 people and has done so since 2018. He is, I believe, relieved that astronaut Noguchi has entered space safely. I would like to ask him about what sort of challenges space offers to Japan.
Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. I have some slides prepared. I'll be talking about JAXA's activities and Japan's space industry. Next page, please. Japan's space development began in 1955. The University of Tokyo had some horizontal pencil rocket launch experiments. In 1970, Japan's first satellite, Osumi, was successfully launched into orbit. Japan became the fourth country in the world to independently launch a satellite. JAXA was formed in 2003 by a merger of organizations that had up to then been implementing government policy through R&D, space science research, and aeronautical research. On this page, it shows that in the early years, we worked by launching meteorological, communications, broadcasting, and scientific satellites. By contributing to the implementation of government policy, the functions and uses of satellites developed. Today, monitoring of the Earth, measurement, PNT, positioning, navigation, timing, satellites, communications, broadcasting satellites, these space systems are well established in our daily lives by now. Next page. On rockets. On the top left, we see the very first early solid fuel rockets that we had. A space transport system allowing Japan to launch at necessary satellites into space is indispensable for maintaining the autonomy of our country's space activities. Having engaged in development activities in accordance with this national policy, we are currently operating the H-2A, H-2B, and Epsilon rockets with a high degree of success. We plan to launch the next generation large rocket, the H3, next year. The H2A and H2B have been transferred to MHI's launch transport service business. And the H3 rocket, two of them will be launched experimentally, and after that, it will be transferred to a launch transportation service as well. As for the Epsilon launch vehicle, we signed a basic agreement with IHI in June of this year for the development of the Epsilon S launch vehicle with the aim of enhancing our international competitiveness and its transfer to a launch service business after development. Next page, please. On human spaceflight, in 1985, the Japanese government joined the International Space Station program. And we developed the Japanese Experiment Module, or GEM, nicknamed Kibo, and the H2 transfer vehicle, or HTV, dubbed Konotori. This development work allowed Japan's space industry to make progress in human space technology. And as was mentioned, astronaut Noguchi 2 days ago was launched on the Crew 1 mission. He's begun a long-term mission on the space station. He has become the 9th Japanese astronaut to embark on such a long-term mission. Next page, please. Recently, even in Japan, there are many space startups and firms from other industries entering the space market in Japan. JAXA has launched a program called SPARK, JAXA Space Innovation Through Partnership. This new R&D program aims to create new space-related businesses and is implemented in partnership with companies that aim to participate in the space industry. JAXA will support the private sector through feasibility studies and R&D, harnessing our technology and expertise in space development. More than 30 companies are already participating in the program. Next page, please. For example, Canon Electronics Incorporated and IHI Aerospace Corporation have invested in Space One Company Limited, which aims to provide a small satellite commercial launch service. And Synspective Incorporated aims to provide a solutions business using small SAR satellite constellations. Also, Ale Company Limited aims to commercialize devices to prevent the proliferation of space debris. Next page, please. Satellites and space debris, even in fields other than those, we have partnerships with the private sector. First of all, with regard to the ISS and the utilization of the Japanese experiment module, Kibo, we are proceeding with projects aiming to promote usage by harnessing the power of the private sector and to create new industries. In 2018, for private sector small satellite deployment service providers from Kibo, Space BD Incorporated and Mitsui and Company Limited were selected. Also in 2019, Space BD Incorporated was selected to provide on-orbit utilization services on the Kibo exposed facility. We expect demand to increase and original services to be provided widely at home and abroad as service providers create ideas and services in a way distinctive of the private sector. JAXA will expand demand along with businesses and contribute to the development of space utilization, including Kibo in low Earth orbit. Next page, space debris. JAXA has been conducting optical telescope and radar observation of space debris at our facility in Okayama Prefecture, and we are in the process of updating these facilities. The Ministry of Defense will be taking the lead to build Japan's Space Situational Awareness System, SSA system. And JAXA is currently cooperating with the Ministry of Defense from a technical standpoint. In addition to develop space debris removal as a new space business for the realization of sustainable space activities, we're carrying out a project called Commercial Removal of Debris Demonstration, Phase 1. In March, JAXA selected Astroscale Japan Incorporated as the contract partner. This is the first partnership type contract in which the private sector will proactively develop spacecraft and conduct technology demonstrations based on their own business strategies, while JAXA will provide comprehensive management and technical support. Next page, please. Moving on to space exploration. In October of last year, 2019, Japan's participation in the US proposed International Space Exploration Program Artemis was decided. In accordance with this decision, JAXA is working with international and industrial partners to further determine the substance of our cooperation. As part of this, JAXA is conducting joint research with Toyota Motor Corporation on a manned pressurized rover using fuel cell vehicle technology for mobility on the lunar surface. We call this a pressurized rover. So we're conducting joint research. By gathering technical prowess and knowledge from firms in various industries, we're taking up the challenge of achieving sustainable lunar surface activities as Team Japan. Last page. I talked today about cooperation with industrial partners, but international cooperation is also an important element. JAXA has cooperative relationships with various agencies, including NASA, through interagency agreements. And we're active also in multilateral forums, such as the Asia-Pacific Space Forum. And we have cooperative relationships or dialogues with more than 60 countries and regions. We don't have time to go into everything, but just some examples. We have with the US and Europe, we have human technology, aeronautics, observation, and so forth. But recently, the Asia Pacific and Middle East have become more active in space. For example, with Australia, Australia will be the return site for Hayabusa and Hayabusa 2. We've also installed a telescope at the Siding Spring Observatory of the Australian National University to observe space debris. Also with India, we're jointly studying a lunar polar exploration mission, LUPEX. And in the Middle East, with the UAE, Hazza Al Mansouri was the UAE's first astronaut, and when he arrived at the space station, we had various events at our experiment module, Kibo. Also, in July of this year, MHI launched the UAE's Mars rover Hope on an H-2A launch vehicle. We have good cooperation between our governments, space agencies, industry, and academia. JAXA wishes to further advance our activities through this kind of cooperation with both industrial and international partners. Thank you.
Chris, you're muted.
Next, I would like to talk about the challenges that we face in space. For example, looking at Japan from space, or trying different sensors from space, there are many things that we could do. But what kinds of experiments do you think about? There was a time when there were many attempts being made to experiment with materials and other things in space. I would like to know what has transpired since then. What is the latest situation for you, Dr. Yamakawa? When we have been moving smoothly into sending people into space, but what are you thinking about as the next thing that we will do? Just in a general sense, I would like to ask you, Dr. Yamakawa, your feelings.
Thank you for that question. Up to now, we've used satellite sensors mostly for communications and measurement, like GPS or Japan's QZSS, and also surveillance or monitoring. We have been engaged in various activities around Earth observation. And all of these functions affect our daily lives. They have become so common that many people don't realize that they rely on space systems. Now, looking at the future of the space domain itself, it will have to be monitored, and that is SSA. It's very important that it be possible to continuously use the space domain, and therefore it itself must be monitored. The ISS can be used as a weightless environment. Proteins can crystallize very easily. And a low gravity environment allows you to understand the structure of proteins. And this could be used to design various medicines in the future. And on the lunar surface, what would we be doing on the moon? From a scientific standpoint, you could have a telescope that was based on the moon, and thus avoiding all of the noise that you would have in on the Earth. You could observe heavenly bodies, observe space with a great deal of sensitivity and with very little noise. I think that what's lacking so far is the private sector's thinking. Whether it's space observation or experiments such as those I've been talking about, we've heard about space travel, but how about new businesses? For example, private broadcasting companies. One is trying to engage in a demonstration, but these ideas come from the private sector, not from JAXA. This, I think, applies both to the surface of the moon and to near the moon as well. So I think that we have to use their power in order to develop technology further.
Thank you very much. There are a huge number of possibilities in the future, and hearing you speak, I wonder how far we can go. I want, in both a good and bad sense, I think we have to try all kinds of things. If we don't, we won't get this new world opening up to us. In that sense, we still have many issues ahead of us. And I would also like to think about what the next generation should be considering. This is one other question. I don't think that maybe too many children are watching at this time of day, but for the young generations, what are your expectations or hopes for them as these kids look into space? Do you have some dream in mind for them? What are your feelings about this? Anything at all, any point of view at all is fine, but if you could speak about that.
Right. So up to now, if you look at the history of humanity and our modes of transportations, we've had boats and railroads and airplanes and satellites, space. It takes about 50 years for conditions to change a lot and to enter a new phase. The challenge doesn't change, but it gets closer to you. It's been more than 50 years since we've gone into space. I think we're ready for a new phase in a sense. Compared to other fields, space can really have the potential to provide a lot of dreams. I think it's very important as a jumping off point for dreams. So for children and for young people, I would love for them to imagine what might be possible. Also, I'd like to use the term space that's close to us, that's familiar to us. I think that that's not too far away. So we can use space to do new things in this new era, I think, and I hope that's the way people will think.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Dr. Yamaka has another meeting or schedule after this. We were very glad that you were able to spend this time with us. Thank you very much. Okay, I would next like to talk to Dr. Norihiro Sakamoto. I will point out at first that in tonight's program, we have three individuals participating in our program, so we're going to go a little past our normal time. So then let me introduce Dr. Sakamoto. He is the chairman of the International Institute for Space Strategic Studies, New Space, and I would like to talk to him about Japan's plans for space policy. He has cooperated with space development as a legislator who has introduced new bills regarding space policy. Thank you, Dr. Sakamoto. Thank you for the introduction. I am Sakamoto. Today, I am very glad. Thank you for inviting me to your ISIC seminar. Tonight, I would like to talk about new space as my title. I have about 15 minutes I would like to speak. My content is divided into three points. The first regards the NGSL group. The second is new space in Japan, an introduction to what that means. And then the third point would be issues of space that Japan is considering and how we think about those. So I would ask that you show the next page, please. First of all, NGSL, excuse me. This was established last year, 2019 in April. So it's just been a year and a half or so since it was established. It's a young organization. In terms of its setup, we have as advisors LDP Terada, legislator Terada, who is from the JPO, who is in charge of the chairman of the committee on space for the LDP. Next, Nakatani, who is also a member of the Diet. He is chairman of the or sub-chairman of the same committee. Then Imazu was formerly a member of Diet and is currently president of JISSS. Sorry, then Tokyo University Oki, Professor Oki. He is not only a professor, but also the assistant president or deputy president of the UN University in Tokyo. Next, Tsunami Atsushi. Mr. Tsunami is president of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So in terms of the LDP space policy and also research and foundations, these things are coordinated to form our organization. And then I serve as the president of the organization or the chairman of the organization. As directors, we have the three individuals noted here, Mr. Oniki, Misuzu Sakai Ryoji, Iwabuchi Yasuaki. Our auditor is Mr. Manabe. He is also the president of Space 4. So how many companies or how many members do we have? Well, as you see here, we have 92 companies. And then as individual members, 44 members. If you break it down, new space related ventures, there are about 30 of these in Japan, of which 27 are participants in our group. And then traditional space development companies, old space we're calling it, we have 11 of those companies. So combining new space and old space, we basically have all of the members of those industries participating. We have 18 other companies. We have companies from different industries. We have groups of student companies. We have regional areas and people from government organizations. So we believe that we can solve Japan's space policy problems by having such a wide variety of participants get together. Now, the purpose, I would talk about the purpose and activities of NGSL. Stated simply, the first point or the first purpose is to create a platform for new space business. The second is to contribute to the UN's SDGs. And then to act in the global commons area with Japan, US, and Europe to further joint development achievements to contribute to world safety and sense of security. We have 6 activities in particular that I've identified here. First of all, networking, business support, incubation, business plans, government support, and space law, research into space law. We're involved in all these activities. If you could see the next slide. These are the primary members. I'm not able to list everyone. These are representative companies. On the left side, you see the new space companies. On the right are the old companies, old space companies. So first of all, with respect to launch rockets, we have the traditional H2A and H2B, which are created by MHI. So this is a participant. The IHI produces the engine turbo pump. IHI Aerospace produces the solid fuel rocket Epsilon. KHI produces the fairing, or is developing fairing. Looking at the left side, on the new space side, we have the Interstellar Technologies Company, Spacewalker, and PD Aerospace. These companies are involved, are new space companies involved in launching. Looking at satellites, the number 2 item, we have Melco NEC on the old space side. These are manufacturers of satellites. And then on the contracting side, we have looking on the left side, we have optical sensor, manufacturer Axel Space, SAR satellite IQPS. So also SAR satellites Inspective, and then hypersensor manufacturer Polar Star Space. Looking at the third item, antennas or communication related companies. On the right, we have Sakase Adotech, which is involved. It has high technology for space sensors. On the left-hand side, on the new space side, Infostellar Company and AstroPub companies. Next page, please. Looking further in terms of data analysis, Fujitsu on the right, SSD and INET are listed. In new space, we have SpaceShift. This is related to SAR data analysis. First Loop Technology, Cyber Physical Fusion, and content such as this. On GNSS side technology, we have MSK. Number 5 is space utilization. There are many companies involved in this, so I've skipped that detail listing. But on the new space side, Dr. Yamakawa just mentioned Astroscale for debris removal, and then artificial shooting stars, ALE, space station usage, Space BD. And then utilization of lunar resources, iSpace. Other than this, we also have a company that is gathering solar system weather information, Space Weather Company. Next page, please. Moving beyond this, I would like to look at some individual companies. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll go through this quickly. But first of all, Axel Space Company. This is optical compact satellites that they are creating. They have a global project under which they plan to produce 50 satellites by 2022 to create a new space observation platform. Next page, please. IQPS Research Lab. This company is also a small satellite company, compact satellite company, with 1 meter resolution, about 100 kilogram sized compact satellites that they are working on. In the future, they would be planning to launch 36 of these satellites in the future, to be able to cover almost the entire planet, so that they can observe the entire planet. Next, this is the Ale company. This is from a world perspective, even I think you can say this is the only such company. The shooting star, artificial shooting star challenge that they have taken on, which they would use for an entertainment purposes, but not only for entertainment, as they would also be using it to collect, acquire various space data, such as for use in debris processing or scientific purposes. So they also have the scientific side. They would use a tethering method, and they are developing a tethering method to remove debris, for a device to remove debris. Next, I look at Astroscale. This is quite well known around the world. I think everyone knows about this company. They seek to have safe navigation of satellites, and they are supplying services to China. In terms of their, they want to produce a sustainable satellite production. Next, looking at iSpace, this company seeks to create a sustainable world by expanding humanity's range of ability to live in space. This is the first Japanese company to seek also to land on, as a private company of Japan, to land on the moon. So they have two big goals. Then the landers, to make landers more agile. They have that as their mission, and rovers. The next page concerns interstellar technologies. I think that everyone may know about this company, or many may know about it, but they would have a liquid fueled small rocket that they are developing. The payloader, they would be providing these launch services as their goal. This rocket they're creating currently, in future, they will be able to, they're currently developing rockets for observation, but they will be developing rockets for carrying satellite payloads. Next page. PD Aerospace. This company is developing space carrying capacity for space travel. They currently are planning to go commercial in 2023, using to be able to offer these into orbit transport services. Next, looking at Infostellar, this company is talking about not car sharing, but antenna sharing as their purpose. The idea is that there are excess capacity of antennas which can be shared for communications purposes. They're currently thinking about a stellar station, which would be a way of communicating between antenna holders with stable technology that they would be able to provide. Next, the Space Shift. This company would be performing data analysis from SAR satellites. Their feature would be that they are using AI to do that satellite data analysis. That automatic processing of data would be used for GIS businesses and constellation functions that they would be able to provide. Next, this is the last, Space BD. This was mentioned by Dr. Yamato a moment ago. This company would use GEM on the ISS to launch satellites and other such purposes. One feature of this company is that they seek to become a general trading company for space. So those are my introduction of new space companies. Next, here I would like to talk about some of the issues that Japan faces in developing space and how we should approach those. A moment ago, I talked about the fact that I was a special researcher for the LDP with regard to space policy. I was involved in that, and I had researched this quite a bit and provided various advice and proposals. One involves the structure and the budget. So in terms of establishing our structure, within the Japan Ministry of Defense, there was not formally a space organization, and it still is not sufficient. We would like to increase this and make a stronger structure within the MOD. And with respect to the budget, we have only a few hundred million in the budget, but we would like to separate this from the Ministry of Defense budget, the defense budget, and create a space budget, which we think we need to increase. If we don't do this, Japan's security will be difficult to protect. Third point is establishment of documents. We had about 5 years ago a national space security strategy established. We need to work on this to create this. It would be a Japanese version of the NSSS. Point 4 has to do with activation of stimulation of the Japanese space industry, making positive use of new space. Of course, we need to fuse new space and old space. 5 has to do with space security think tanks and utilization of those. In terms of such think tanks in Japan, we only have one, which is the JISS in NGSL as well, our organization. We think that we need to work on technology and policy to ourselves become such a think tank. We want to make positive use of JISS starting 3 years ago. This is going to be the key to our defense space policy. Next, let me talk about collaboration. IGS for information gathering. This is a large scale satellite. We need to, from a cost standpoint as well, go into combine this with small satellite constellations. These small satellites we can choose changes points with the large satellites and look in detail with the small satellites. Sorry, reverse of that. We would be cooperating with the US on space, observation of space objects. MDA is relates to observation or surveillance of the Indo-Pacific region. This is something we need to do strongly, which will use space technology. Missile surveillance, this is something which the US is promoting, but we're thinking, can't we use, again, aren't there uses for small satellites for this purpose, with small optical sensors, IR sensors, and so forth. Sorry, UV sensors. No, IR sensors. In terms of GNSS systems and communications, Japan had not previously considered, had not formally considered this, HEMP, pulse countermeasures, electromagnetic pulse countermeasures. When a we have had a situation where a satellite exploded, creating large problems with electromagnetic pulse. Also, the QZSS was something which Japan did create by itself, and we need to make further use of it. Currently, we purchase a lot from the USS in terms of GPS receivers. We would like to be able to combine this with the QZSS researchers. And finally, in terms of signal intelligence, we need to create a information gathering satellite for SIGINT purposes. We think we can use these SIGINT satellites for this purpose. To combine these with the large-scale satellites would be a good method, is how we feel. In terms of space security, which companies could contribute or be involved and be used for this purpose? I have tried to think through this in my own fashion. First of all, surveillance. Optical satellites, axial space, SAR, IQPS, and Synspective. And then in terms of hypersensors, Polar Star Space, these would be the companies that I think could be made good use of. In SSA, SDA, SDM, again, Astroscale for debris removal, ALE, again, in antennas, Infostellar and Astrocab for data analysis, space shift, for data utilization, MSK. Next page, please. Next, we're talking about small launch vehicles. This would be the Interstellar Technologies company that I mentioned earlier. I think this would be useful. Again, the feature is low cost, so it enables us to quickly launch satellites. They still don't have a rocket, but once they do, I think it will have quite wide use, utilization. Space planes. There's a place, Hakko, in Hokkaido to be used as a launch site. So we would use that Hokkaido base. This has almost the same space as the Cape Canaveral in the US. So it would be useful for small satellite and small rocket launches as well. We don't have, most of Japan's launch sites are in the south, Tanegashima, Uchinora. But if we were able to use this space only, then we end up not being able to go further in Japan space development. So I think we definitely need to use this Hokkaido space as well. In terms of moon resource development, HAP, iSpace, sorry. In terms of ISS utilization, there are many uses still, I think. For example, SSS, MD sensors could be mounted to gather security data, for example. I think that would be a good use. Finally, on the next page, up until now, this is kind of a summary of what I've discussed. There are 4 points. One point is the Earth is round, therefore it's impossible for one single country to obtain complete security information. Therefore, there needs to be use of the global commons between US, Japan, Europe to cooperate, to acquire and use the data from space, maritime, and cyber. In particular, we would divide the Earth into 3 parts. The US, Europe, and Japan. Asia would divide labor to acquire such data. Third point is space surveillance and security themes that can be used in new small space satellites that can contribute to those purposes. This is the most important point, is the fourth. Considering cost, benefit, and development speed, it makes sense to use new space. However, given the lack of human resources, facilities, and funding for new space, it is essential that new space be combined with old space and that the government and JAXA support these space startups. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Dr. Sakamoto. There are many companies taking on many different challenges. I could see clearly from your explanation. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Pace. Dr. Pace is participating by telephone, so he will not be visible in a video. He is the Secretary General of the National Space Council. He has been consistently involved in space issues and has held several university research and government positions. Dr. Pace, thank you. I would like to ask you to speak, please.
We hear you fine, Dr. Pace. Thank you.
That have been undertaken in this administration. We have developed, and the president has signed 5 space policy directives. The first one directed the U.S. to return to the moon with commercial and international partners, and then proceed on to Mars. And so the Artemis program is a result of that first directive. The second directive discussed reducing regulation on industry or updating that regulation to take advantage of new technical conditions and new realities. And so Space Policy Directive 2 focused primarily on the launch industry, the remote sensing industry, and export controls. We recognize that space is very expensive, and therefore we need to grow the economy in order to support space activities. So reducing regulation was a high priority for us, and we've been working on that very hard in this administration. Space Policy Directive 3 recognized that there is an increasing number of satellites in space, and that these increasing activities in space could pose a threat of congestion and collision. And so we developed the first national space traffic management policy, which gave new roles to our Department of Commerce to monitor space traffic and to share information with commercial users. And and the Commerce Department is in close cooperation with the Department of Defense in carrying out this function. Recognizing that the United States is very dependent upon space, our economy, our security, and our international relations, the President decided to propose the establishment of the U.S. Space Force, that is a dedicated military service devoted to space. This U.S. Space Force currently exists inside the Department of the Air Force, somewhat like the U.S. Marine Corps exists inside the Department of the Navy. And we're coming up on the first year anniversary of the Space Force, and we've made a lot of progress, and there's still a lot of work to do. The fifth directive dealt with cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is important not only for military purposes, but it's also important for commercial purposes. And our ability to cooperate with other countries in many ways is going to be affected by the amount of cybersecurity we can provide. It's well known the U.S. has close relationships with allies like the United Kingdom and Australia and Canada due to the close security relationships we have. Japan is a close ally, and we are working hard with Japan to strengthen cybersecurity in Japan so we can enable ever closer security and commercial cooperation with Japan. We had an update of the national space policy that's currently in work. It has not been signed by the president yet. We are hopeful. It basically is a summation of these previous directives, and it builds on past U.S. policy. So it'll, in many ways, be a continuation of past policy, but with some updates, as I've described. And then finally, we've had a series of smaller executive orders and memorandum that have dealt with specific topics. The president approved a memorandum that updated our rules for launching spacecraft containing nuclear power sources. The last such memo was done in 1977, so it was very out of date. So we were happy to update that. We've also recognized how critical infrastructure like banking and transportation and communications are all dependent upon position, navigation, and timing services. And so we have an executive order on strengthening the resilience of our critical infrastructure to potential disruptions of that service. And then lastly, we have an executive order that encourages international support for the recovery and use of space resources. So this is things like lunar mining and asteroid mining. And we've made clear that U.S. persons really have the same right as the U.S. government for extracting and using these resources. We feel, of course, that we own the lunar rocks that were brought back by Apollo. So that if future U.S. companies go out and recover and use lunar resources, that they will be have the same rights and be able to use those resources and prosper from them. Next chart. I'll go through this very briefly. Our priorities in the commercial space area are not very surprising. We want to make sure that the U.S. is a strong competitor. We want to lower the regulatory burdens so we attract companies to come and work in the U.S. And we look at commercial issues in what we call a whole of government perspective. That is, we look at how commercial activities can support both civil and military space efforts. That is, commercial activities are important in their own right, but they also affect other national interests. Next chart. One example of the remote sensing reforms that I wanted to highlight was in commercial remote sensing. I was part of the Commerce Department in 1992 when the Land Remote Sensing Policy Act was passed, and we issued the first license for a high-resolution remote sensing system. High resolution back then was considered to be 3 meters. Of course, much higher resolution is done today. And what has happened since then is many new types of sensors have arrived, and many constellations with many more satellites have arrived. And our old regulations were having great difficulty keeping up with this growth. So what the Commerce Department did was put out new regulations in May of 2020, and they eliminated most restrictions on licenses, but still retained restrictions on those remote sensing systems which were unique to the U.S. That is, if a U.S. company was providing a capability that could possibly pose a risk to defense purposes, we do have restrictions on those systems so that we don't put U.S. forces or allies at risk. but they only apply to systems that are unique to the US. We don't try to control things where the capabilities are widely available in the international market. So if you will, this is a market-driven regulatory structure that adapts as global markets change. Next chart. Our national security priorities, again, should not be surprising. We, again, recognize that we need to make sure our space systems are very resilient. That is, if there is harm to one satellite or a few satellites or some of our ground systems, that we have backups and alternative ways of performing our functions. We don't want to have a fragile space system. We want to make sure it's very resilient against either intentional or unintentional threats. We want to strengthen our options with our allies to deter potential adversaries from extending conflict into space by basically making clear that any such attempt will fail, and therefore people should not, possible adversaries should not be tempted to harm U.S. interests in space. And most broadly, we also want to foster a very supportive domestic and international environment that we recognize that clear security frameworks, clear regulatory frameworks, improving engagements between countries in space cooperation, those activities help build up what we call norms of behavior, that is, informal rules as well as legal rules for how countries should behave in space. We haven't had, while we've been in space for many, many decades, we don't have the same kind of experience as we do in the air and sea. So we need to build up more common understanding about how countries and companies should behave in space. So we see building those kind of understanding as also important to our national security. Next chart. An example of a specific activity that we are working with Japan is in national security space. I was in Japan in late August and with General J. Raymond, who is the commander of U.S. Space Forces. And we signed an agreement. The lawyers are still approving the final version, but we initialed agreement of a memorandum of understanding to place a U.S. payload that would monitor outer space on a Japanese QZSS satellite. So the QZSS satellite is being a host to support a payload, and the data from the satellite will, of course, be shared with Japan. And so this is an example of cooperation between the U.S. and Japan to monitor the space environment. And as Yamakawa Sensei mentioned earlier, this is an increasing responsibility of the Ministry of Defense. And then my last chart. The United States and Japan had a strong strategic partnership. As Yamakawa Sensei mentioned, Japan joined the International Space Station program in 1985, going back many years. Between the agreement was between President Reagan and Prime Minister Nakasone. That good relationship continues today. And I have to quote my boss when he said that he was pleased to confirm that he and Prime Minister Abe have agreed to dramatically expand our nation's cooperation in human space exploration, and that there is really nothing more important right now than space, and it's an exciting starting point for greater collaboration on many other things. And as we've discussed in government meetings, this includes security cooperation, commercial cooperation, as well as traditional civil space cooperation. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
博士、ご説明ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Doctor, very much for your description. listening to you and Dr. Sakamoto, I see that the space is becoming more and more complicated, more and more crowded. Then I would like to ask Dr. Sakamoto, in terms of the crowdedness or traffic jam of space, that has led to a lot of debris. I think this is a very large technical challenge, but at the same time, it is something that we can't avoid if we're able to want to use space safely. So, excuse me for asking this question out of the blue, but how do you think we should approach this space debris question, Dr. Sakamoto? Please let me know your thoughts.
The first priority is to understand what is actually out there, to understand the degree of the threat. So we are building better space situational awareness capabilities by tapping the private sector. That is, we have, of course, military capabilities that are quite good, but we also have growing capabilities in optical and radar data that companies can provide to commercial companies. And we think we can blend that data together in what's called an open architecture data repository, which is a fancy term for a cloud service. And if we have better information, we can avoid unnecessary maneuvers of satellites because we can know when they really are at risk and when they are not. So better information is the first requirement. The second thing we can do is to reduce the amount of new debris we create. We are currently in a regulatory rulemaking with our Federal Communications Commission to set new rules for constellations of satellites. For example, should they be required to maneuver and dispose of themselves at the end of life, especially if they're at a high altitude where they will not decay into the Earth's atmosphere naturally. And so our Federal Communications Commission is discussing that. We have put out a notice to that rulemaking through the World Trade Organization because many international companies are concerned about this, and we have received international comments back to our rulemaking. Finally, if we have good information and we've done everything we can to reduce the creation of new debris, then finally there will be a need to actively remove debris. But that is still a bit farther in the future, and that's why companies are thinking about it now. And I believe the first priority will be to remove objects that pose the greatest risk. There are some rather large spent upper stages that could potentially collide with each other. They don't have the ability to maneuver. And if they were to collide, they would create new debris that would be very harmful. So I think we have a growing understanding of what the priority list should be for removal of space objects to benefit the space environment in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
坂本先生、これから先、我
Dr.
が
Sakamoto,
資源を投じて、
in the future, our country, in order to participate in space development through the perspective of resources, what do you think is the way specifically we should approach this? Japan's finances, in particular, we have huge impositions that have been financial impositions due to Corona. Within that environment, as we try to push forward with Japan's space policy, I think you mentioned that you want these new space companies to work hard and become more to the forefront. Where do you think we should concentrate our efforts? Thank you for your question. One point is that we are advancing in technology, and satellites have become commoditized. If we use that technology, with respect to compact satellites, compact rockets, they are now becoming possible. So if we have small and high performance rockets, we are able to reduce the cost of space development. I think that's a major direction for one. The second point would be in terms of our industrial development. I have been thinking about this theme for about 20 years. It's still true. The conclusion would be that the things that contribute to the development of the industry would be two. One is that the people have to enjoy space. So that would be things like space travel. 40 years ago, we talked about, Japanese were still talking about traveling the world. It has become possible to travel around the circumference of the Earth. Over 70 years or so, it may be possible to travel to the moon. So that would be one point, space travel. Second one is the use of space resources and energy. For example, if we generate electricity in space and then send that down to Earth, that would help Japan, which has few resources. So we would be able to, on our own, supply energy or resources. But when you send this energy generated in space, if you have losses in the efficiency as you try to deliver it to consumers. You need about 2x. Now, so this would be a major direction for Japan's solution of its insufficient energy resources, I would believe. Thank you. Dr. Pace and Dr. Sakamoto, thank you for staying on to a late hour. With respect to this program, this is available for viewing on our ISIC page. We also have the journal, Defense Journal, that's Defense Technology Journal, which has turned these meetings into a printed form. So this is also the birthday of a certain famous person who is 92 years old today. That would be Mickey Mouse. Happy birthday. Thank you everyone for staying on the call late at night. We will have another meeting in 3 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and my thanks to the interpreters.
Much obliged.